It's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello, so we're back, or rather I'm back after a long hiatus from the pod to bring back some classic sardonic wit to the proceedings. As Tom enjoys his travels with a trip to Hong Kong, I'm here to mix things up, unchained and unleashed from the shackles of podcast jail. I'm joined by regular pod co-host Lucy Hynett, as always. I think last time I podded with you, I only had one child, so it was quite a long time ago. How are you doing today, Lucy?
I'm good, thank you. It's nice to have you on, Nick, and I'm sure the listeners are looking forward to a new point of view, having had weeks of Tom and I agreeing far too much, really. We are Who Got the Assist. When he's not on his holidays, you can usually find Tom on the main account at WGTA _ FPL. You can find the wonderful Nick here at WGTA _ Nick, and you can find me, Lucy, at Lucy Hynett with 2 T's. On the pod today, we'll begin with general chit-chat about the week. As several well-backed teams have struggled, we'll take a look at the next 5 game weeks or so with a focus on the big 6, the strong performers and the underachievers, as well as the disruptors breaking into the top 10, like Brighton, Brentford and Newcastle. This will include mentions of doubles and blanks, but there are lots of unknowns at this stage due to cup involvement, so you'll have to forgive us if things sound tentative. We'll then look at how we categorise what is an easy game week and what is a difficult game. How much does difficulty actually matter? And along the way, we hope to pick up on your listener questions. As this has been the case in a few recent pods, we're recording mid-game week on Monday the 16th of January. There's plenty of time for a double game week turnaround, or at least that's what I'm telling myself.
So yeah, we'll crack on as always. Yeah, moving on to sort of the main section. We're not going to do a mini league update this week, as Lucy said. We're recording midweek. There's still a couple of games in play, including the City Spurs game, which a lot of people have sort of triple captained or captain Haaland. So there's no point doing that now. And we're not going to do the market forces either, but rest assured, normal service will resume next week as kind of the fixtures go back to normal a little bit. So we're going to start, I guess, just doing a quick overview of our recent progress today, how the last week went for us, how this week is going. As I said, it's not over yet, but obviously we can have a little bit of a chat about our game weeks. I think it's probably worth myself actually just giving a little bit of a broader update in terms of what's going on with me, because you haven't heard from me
how are you, Nick?
in ages.
What players have you got?
I've got a mixed bag team. So yeah, I'll give a little bit of an overview. My season's not been great. I think it's perhaps because I've not been on the pod. It's been a bit of a shocker, to be honest. I did drop down past the 1 million point at the turn of the World Cup. But since the World Cup, did the mini wildcard, it's actually been all right. I've been progressing back steadily up the league, and I went back up to sort of 478k overall rank. So managed to halve my rank since the World Cup. So that's pretty decent, I suppose. Quite happy with a few of my selections, especially in game week 19. Luke Shaw gave me the 15-pointer. I got a 9-pointer from him the week before. I also had Harry Kane, and he got me a 16-pointer. So really decent 76. And like Rashford's been doing pretty well for me as well the last few weeks. This week, not so good. Back to regular service, I'm afraid. Just 40 points so far. So pretty poor. I think main issue, I guess, is not having the likes of Newcastle double defence or an Arsenal defender. I actually benched Ramsdale for Ward, which I think Tom did as well. So I'm not alone in that madness. But not a great week so far. Didn't triple captain Haaland. I just gave him the captaincy, but obviously he's only got 2 points. But he's still got Spurs to play, so he's going to get his hat-trick there, no doubt. And also Mitrovic missing his penalty with his double kick or whatever the hell happened. Not good. 0 pointer there. When I saw the result, the first thing I saw was a missed penalty, and I was praying that Nick Pope hadn't saved it, because I knew if Pope had saved it, it would have been even worse for me. But so I was quite pleased to see that it hadn't been a saved pen, but rather a missed pen in quite unusual circumstances. I can't recall another penalty like that with a double touch. And I'm sure something's happened before, but I can't recall one at least. So that was quite interesting. But yeah, as we said, game still going on. Still got Triple City, Haaland captain, De Bruyne, Cancelo. I've still got him, and Shaw and Rashford with the double as well, and Harry Kane as well, actually. So hoping that I can recover this game with 6 doublers still to go.
much the same as you left. I'm doing slightly better so far, but not a lot better. I'm 48 points, mainly as a result of a Kepa clean sheet. So whereas a lot of people didn't have Ramsdale on, I had Kepa with his 10-pointer. So that's probably helped me out. The previous week, though, I didn't do anywhere near as well as you with your 76. I only got 59. The difference probably being Harry Kane because I didn't buy him until this week. And yeah, seemed to have got really unlucky on the Mitrovic thing with the booking in the double game week and the missed penalty, which, as you said, I don't really know how you legislate for that kind of random double kick, whatever it was. I think there was quite a lot of controversy on Twitter about whether it should have been given as a miss. I mean, it's quite clearly a miss. Like if it's not going to be allowed, then I think you've got to take that one on the chin.
I think it's a miss. It's just an unfortunate event, but
yeah,
it's definitely
it's really bad luck. And to be honest, well, would an actual miss have been that surprising? Probably not. But yes, I've got the same as you ready for the rest of the double game week, and I'm hoping that pulls it round. Like you didn't go for the Haaland triple captaincy, but I know that Tom did. So it's probably for the best between his Ramsdale benching and his Haaland triple captaincy that he's not on this week, really.
Yeah, perhaps. No, I still think that Haaland's going to potentially haul against Spurs. It's just inevitable. So I won't be too arrogant and boastful about not having triple captain him at the halfway point. It would be a very risky thing to do. But yeah, sounds like we've both had. Well, I've had a pretty poor game week so far. Yours is sort of middling, but still early days a little bit. So yeah, we shall see what the rest of the week brings for us. Cool. So I guess we'll move on. I guess, and as Lucy said in sort of the overview, we're going to be looking a little bit at some of the top 6 sides and covering off as also some of those, let's say, call them pretenders, or perhaps that sounds a bit rude, but the teams that are starting to break into that top 6. The likes of Newcastle, obviously having a storm of a season, but there's a few other clubs that are also doing really well. Likes of Brentford and Brighton, I think. Worth calling out, and Fulham as well, having an incredible season. So we're going to cover off those teams, the teams to focus on for this course of the season and next 5 game weeks. And I think we're going to start with Manchester City. So we did have a few questions on City as well. We're wondering about Haaland, lots of questions about Haaland. FPL Brain, JP, he asked us, have his underlying numbers deteriorated as well as his production? And he raised that it looks like City and Pep are so risk averse with the ball that they don't try any through balls or crosses to him unless he's wide open. So a few concerns seem to be generating about Haaland. Adam Pritchard asked us if we should move away from the Haaland perma cap. And Mitchell Sterling also said, should we be abandoning Man City assets outside of Haaland or even considering the likes of Grealish? So I guess, Lucy, if you want to kick us off in terms of what you think about Haaland. Obviously, he's key to everyone's team. His status is unquestionable, but the captaincy and his underlying numbers, what your kind of thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is probably the first time in the season where we've all started to genuinely consider if he isn't worth the kind of perma captain status that we gave to him. I think those that are on a triple captain right now, as you said, shouldn't give up hope. I think Spurs, especially in the first half recently, don't look great. So I think if they had a bad first half against City coming up, then there's no reason to say that Haaland can't get a good return. I was very open in my skepticism about using the triple captaincy this game week when we last recorded. But as I said, I know Tom went there and there were plenty of good reasons to do so, not least the prospect of good expected minutes as City kind of are yet to restart the European campaign. And Haaland did complete 90 minutes for the 5th consecutive week in that Manchester derby. So I think in terms of people judging his minutes, that's kind of come off. So I wouldn't be losing hope if you are waiting on that Spurs game as a triple captain. I think it could easily come off all right. I mean, I appreciate a blank isn't ideal for the first of the 2, but he could easily pull that round. I think that question around Haaland's underlying numbers and kind of City's slight tweak maybe since the World Cup. I think it's quite clear that they are trying to be a bit more controlled in their possession. And we saw Pep go through a similar process not that long ago, again, where he tweaked tactics to try and improve control and reduce risk. And I think that Haaland's probably been the kind of been dented by that change. That said, his numbers aren't actually that bad. His XG per 90 has dropped, but I think it still leads the way over the last 6. Only Nunez and Haaland have a non-pen XG over that period, over 3. I think it's when you introduce assist potential, which is obviously where Haaland doesn't tend to do so well. He's second to Nunez for XGI over that same 6-week period. And the interesting thing is that Tony, Mitrovic and Rashford are all close behind when you start to factor in XA and it's, that kind of more generic goal involvement. And I think that's probably where we're starting to perhaps be a bit disillusioned with Haaland, just because of his price, really. When you start to look at Tony and Mitrovic and Rashford, they're obviously a much cheaper price point, and that's probably adding to the pressure. I think it's a case we've got to in this kind of weird stage of the season where the big players, the high ticket players probably aren't providing what we'd expect from them. But then again, they're highly priced for a reason. So maybe we should be more patient. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Nick. Are you losing faith yet?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I've lost faith or losing faith at this moment in time. I think, if we sort of like look at the sort of pre-World Cup versus sort of the post-World Cup, since the post-World Cup, there's only been 4 games for Haaland in the league, and he's netted 3 goals in them. That sounds pretty damn reasonable when you kind of think about that. So I think it's just the last couple, which he's not done so well in. I think, and even watching the games, he just wasn't involved very much at all. Like, I think it was the Chelsea game where he was like almost at the 40th minute that he got his first touch or something. And suddenly he came to life and actually got involved with a little bit of a tussle with Kukureya, I think it was, in the corner. But in the Manchester United game, he had an XG of it's registered around 0.03. So a bit worrying in terms of his involvement there. But then actually, you think about it, he was playing Chelsea and Manchester United. Those aren't the games that City will, dominate in possession all the time. Chelsea and United do put up a fair fight against the likes of City. So tough games. I think you can't overanalyze sort of such a small sample. But I think he set such a high standard for himself over the course of the first half of the season. We essentially people talking about him breaking 40 goals in a season and stuff like that, which would be incredible. So, and he's still obviously on. He's on 21 after 20 games. So I think, just about on for that if he can maintain the form. But I think for me, he does remain the auto captain. I think it's just kind of looking at a few games. I think the next schedule or so, he might be tempted by a Rashford punt in game 22, maybe. Especially if they have a double. 26, perhaps Saka. I don't know. But apart from that, I think it's just keep it on Haaland. And part of it, I know you mentioned a few kind of other players who are cheaper prices that are also doing very well. But I think in terms of the big hitters, there's no one that's really kind of knocking on the door saying, captain me. We don't have Mo Salah on one of his ridiculous runs where he's returning double figures week in, week out. And if there was someone like that, I think there'd be perhaps a stronger case for a different captain option. I looked at the midfielders in general. I think there's only one player that actually just scored double figures this season so far, and that's Rodrigo, randomly, 10 goals. So there's not really a Salah or even like a Mane that kind of just stepping out and saying, captain me, I deserve the armband. It's really just Haaland. And I think he is the key man. And, as I said, Spurs up next, so he's going to score a hat-trick midweek and render this entire discussion obsolete.
Do you think we've just got unrealistic expectations around Haaland just because of how good he's been?
Yeah, I think so. I think, people get inherently selfish, just kind of expecting returns every single week. And there's never been a single player in FPL that's kind of been able to actually achieve that. There's always going to be a blank game week here and there. But I think, we can expect Haaland to continue to maintain his form. I'm not concerned for now, but, talk to me after game week 23, 24, and it's still no goals, I will start to worry. And I think you could, we're very fickle as FPL managers, with 3 blanks in a row, and everyone will be selling him and all sorts. But my advice would be to kind of keep the faith for now and keep the armband on him as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of that question about Grealish as like an alternative or another City player, I think at the moment, there's too much rotation with Foden, and I think pretty much expected minutes are pretty much a problem for everyone in that City team who aren't Edison, De Bruyne or Haaland. I think the exception was probably Stones, who had my interest before the injury, and that's about it. As for whether we should be abandoning them, I don't think so. I wouldn't be abandoning them before double game week 23. Should that all goes ahead? That's not one of those ones that can't go ahead, is it? I think
it's nailed on game week 23.
That's nailed on, isn't it? Yeah, it's got to the point now. I'm like, what is real and what is not? Yes, I wouldn't be getting rid of them ahead of 23. I think it's reasonable to keep a player if you think he's going to start an additional game. But yeah, I probably wouldn't be looking at the more fringe players. I think there was a lot of discussion this week about Mahrez, just usual, health risks around Mahrez. If you're cool with the risks, then go for it. But it's not really for me, I have to say. Not that that's surprising that he's not really for me, given how dull I am. But I'm sure you agree on that one, right?
Yeah, I'm probably the same. You got two dullards on the pod today, but
I've reformed Tom. He's one now. So
Tom, well, he's doing well, so he's becoming a. Yeah, I think with City, you're right. I think Grealish, he's only played 90 minutes twice this season in the league, which is not great. He's more kind of utilised the impact sub, so I don't think he's right. I think Foden has been in my team far too much already over the past couple of seasons, and I'm constantly getting hammered by him getting benched. So, I'm definitely not ready to go back there. No chance of that happening. And I still actually have Cancelo in my team as well, rotting at 7.1 million. So I am been considering flogging him, but probably not this game week. But I think he's just one to obviously watch if he's just continuing to not play full games and to miss games and stuff, because he's got Lewis or whoever it is at 4 million knocking on the door and taking his space. So Cancelo is potentially one I might sell. I've got De Bruyne as well. I think most people have the double game week, and he's an interesting one as well, because he, like Haaland, costs a lot of money. I mean, I'm triple City right now, and that is a massive chunk of my budget, about 32 million across the three of them that I'm spending on the triple City. And I think you're right. Game week 23, they've got a double. You don't really want to be selling them. They've got Wolves up next, who haven't been very good at all this season, especially offensively. So even though I'm a bit concerned about their recent form, they've not been great. They've not been the kind of the barnstorming best, I guess. They lost to Manchester United, and they've only narrowly sort of beaten Chelsea, and even they drew against Everton. Who draws against Everton?
Even we don't draw against Everton.
Yeah, even Southampton. In game week 18. So yeah, worrying times, I guess, at Manchester City. But I think with our FPL teams, they're too good a club to kind of continue to be in poor form. And with some reasonable fixtures coming up next, I mean, Wolves, Spurs, they're playing twice. And then the Aston Villa, Arsenal double. And then after that, even you've got Nottingham Forest. They do have a game in 25, which is great, because a lot of teams are blanking in 25 as well. And that's away to Bournemouth. So you're going to want to be tripled up there. And Newcastle, Crystal Palace after that, that's a really good run. So, I'm not in a rush to sell their assets, even if I am a bit worried about their current form.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm with that. Yeah. Good
stuff. Cool. So I guess we'll move on then, and we'll cover. You have a sort of big team. I guess we have to cover them, don't we? So it's Arsenal.
Reluctantly.
Yeah, reluctantly covering them after their latest victory in the North London derby. But actually, Tom's not here to rub it in. Obviously they're having a great season. So loads of questions on Arsenal in terms of who we own, really. So I think Cy Rutherford, he puts it well in saying, which three Arsenal assets should we own? Jimmy the Claret asks us, should we get double defence or double attack? Jolly Forward asks us about a third Arsenal spot not named, asks us about triple midfield as well. So Arsenal, Lucy, who do you own at the moment? Who do you think sort of the best free to own? What kind of your thoughts there?
Well, for people that regularly listen, they'll know that I basically decided against Saka for reasons I'm not quite clear, but mainly it was because I felt that Mitrovic was worth it for the double game week, so I went with a different structure, and that's kind of taken me on this path away from Saka, as we often have these weird paths on FPL where you can't really restructure very easily, and you end up kind of locked into something which you essentially realise is a terrible idea, but you can't go back on. So at the moment, I've got quite deep Saka envy. Do you have Saka by your interest?
No, I don't.
No. So every week I just have Tom telling me how many points Saka got for him, which is great. Saka is one of the ones that I would definitely want. I am hoping eventually to go through to a 3-5-2, which would allow me more funds in midfield to buy him. But if not, potentially Almiron out for him. Saka, I think, is a great pick. Odegaard is obviously doing brilliantly and is relatively low cost. I think he's great if you've got a bit of money to upgrade on someone like Almiron. And then I think I'd want a defender. I don't think the triple defense or triple midfield never really appeals to me. And I think I'd probably going for Gabriel. I like Ramsdale actually as a kind of permanent fixture, but I am now on this annoying Kepa trail again. Not my best moment. So I think I'd be looking at Gabriel, Saka, and Odegaard. The only thing I would say is I know Martinelli has been a little disappointing, but he's still fairly involved. Stats aren't great, but not terrible. And I think he's probably still quite good value for those of us that have had him since the beginning. So I'm not in a huge hurry to move him on. So maybe that I just add one of Odegaard or Saka to him rather than swapping him out. I always struggle to convince myself on the merits of a sideways swap from one midfielder to another. So I probably wouldn't think he was an urgent one to move on, but I think probably he's now a bit further down the pecking order in terms of who I ideally want. I've got a problem in that I don't seem to start White despite owning him. He sits on the bench for most of the time, and then when I do decide to play him, he gets subbed in the 59th minute. So not so great. How about you, Nick?
You got off with that one, I think, in the end, considering they conceded twice after the 59th minute. But yeah, that was pretty brutal at the time for the White owners. I did have him earlier in the season, but I no longer have him. I've got Ramsdale and Martinelli, but of course I keep benching Ramsdale. Well, only this week really, but I benched him for Ward and Martinelli. Didn't return this week, got yellow carded, so not ideal, whilst everyone else was getting their scores. So I think in terms of the Arsenal players, I think, Odegaard, obviously, he's been incredible, having a killer of a season. And he's now actually the top scoring midfielder in the game, just having a great season. I think he's kind of overperforming his XG actually a little bit, which is interesting. So he's actually had 4.32 XG and but 8 goals. So that's quite impressive of him. So maybe he is overperforming a little bit. It's interesting actually that Martinelli has the highest XG of the three of them, the three kind of amigos in the fielder. With sort of Saka and Odegaard. Martinelli's got the highest XG, but we're all kind of talking about should we sell him? And most of us have him. That's the thing. I've had him since game week 1, and I haven't really considered selling him at all. He's just been accruing value, just been a really good asset. But I feel like almost like I'm getting bored of him a little bit. I want to kind of do something a little bit different. And
I guess with him, is his numbers are kind of dropping off in terms of he may have that total XG that's higher than the other two, but in terms of the distribution over the last sort of 5 or 6 weeks, it's not as good. So it looks like it's kind of the balance of the team is maybe shifting away from him a little bit. But I'm with you in the sense that I don't think it's like a massive high priority transfer. I mean, how often are you in the position where you can be like, "Ooh, this Arsenal midfielder, I'll swap for another Arsenal midfielder"? I mean, I don't. Do you ever have that many free transfers?
No, I don't. I really don't. I mean, it's as you said, it's for maybe tapering off a little bit, but he's still kind of a key man in that Arsenal attack line. So I'm really not a fan of the sort of the internal transfer, so to speak. And it always kind of blows up in your face. We've talked in the past, I think, previous years about Liverpool rotations, swapping like Salah to Mane and weird things like that. So I always said, don't do it. Just leave it as it is, because it's going to blow up in your face. The minute you kind of move one player from the same club to another player, you're going to shoot yourself, because this week it's Saka and Odegaard returning, but next week it will easily be Martinelli. So I never encourage that. But saying that, if I was to kind of pick my three, say you're starting from scratch, I would say 2 midfielders and a defender. I wouldn't go for the triple midfield, but I also wouldn't go for the double defense. I think I'd probably say Saka, Odegaard, and White would be the 3 to own if you were just saying what 3 do I get in. But many of us have a lot of money tied up in Martinelli. Many of us bought him at a very cheap price, so I wouldn't sell him. I think we've got other fires to put out. Currently, I've got Ramsdale and Martinelli, as I said. So if I was to get another midfielder in, and looking at the fixtures, they've got that double game week in 23. It might be then, or it may even be in 22 for the away game against Everton. I'd probably be targeting Saka actually, if I had to pick between Saka and Odegaard, just because I think Odegaard's been incredible, but I just feel like Saka has a greater overall goal threat. I think Odegaard's kind of more, plays a slightly deeper role kind of thing. Like Saka's,
Saka's got penalties as well, hasn't he? So that's a nice little extra to kind of depend on, as long as it's, doesn't do a weird double hit or anything like that.
Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully we don't see that again. So I think those would be my 3 picks. But then I think as I said, with those that own Martinelli, like myself, I wouldn't be selling him either.
Excellent. So shall we move on to Man United?
Yeah, let's move on to Manchester United. So again, had a question about tripling up with them from FPL O'Hiri. He said, should I do De Bruyne to Bruno? United, they've got kind of a weird fixture run. They do have a double game week double game week in 22, which is Crystal Palace and maybe Leeds or Brentford, but we don't know if that's going to happen or not. So if they do have a double game week in there, that's a good opportunity for Rashford, captain. You could be talking about a triple up, but they've got Leeds, Leicester, and then potential blank against Brentford. It's a tricky one to try and fit them in. I mean, I've got Rashford and Shaw at the moment, and obviously Rashford, I think, nailed on in our teams, having an excellent season so far. Really discovered his form after a largely absent couple of years. It's just, I still think it's absolutely ridiculous that he got priced at 6.5 million. Like, what a ridiculous bargain that has turned out to be.
Way too
crazy.
Far on slashing his price, didn't they?
I think it's just an angry FPL admin and decided I'm getting 3 million off Rashford, just cut prices everywhere, bargains everywhere, which we might not see again. So he's definitely sticking in my team. Luke Shaw, I think, he's probably the best defender to pick out of all the defenders, especially after his goal the other way. He seems to be weirdly playing centre back. He has been a little bit, which is a bit weird.
It was just Lisandro Martinez not quite being fit thing, I think. I don't think it'll be a permanent thing.
Exactly. So I think, there could be a case that you could get someone like Bruno in for the 22 double, but you might be selling him pretty quickly afterwards. I'm not sure. You just have to kind of navigate around it if you do want to kind of really target the fixtures, but you entering hits territory and stuff like that, aren't you, to kind of get another premium like that in.
I think he's quite an awkward price point, Bruno, in sense that unless you're willing to lose someone like KDB, who I'm not really because of the game week 23 prospect, I think he's quite difficult to wiggle in, because I think theoretically we should be considering a triple up. I think those fixtures in game week 22 or prospective fixtures in game week 22 would be good enough to warrant the triple up. I just can't find a kind of obvious way to do it. And as you said, there's the prospect of a blank 25. So you kind of only really want to invest if you're confident about that investment. And as I said, I can't find an easy way to get Bruno in. I think he's actually quite a decent prospect otherwise. Martial's minutes are a massive problem. I started after the World Cup with Martial, and he was always kind of like my placeholder for Mitrovic. So I was kind of a bit reluctant to get rid of him, but given he's struggled with fitness, his minutes haven't been great even when he has been fit. I really struggled to sell myself on that one. And then you're kind of at the defence, and I don't really know if the defence is good enough to warrant a double up. And I also don't know where you go on that. It would have to be Martinez, I think, at 4.5 as a kind of cheap benchable option. And in which case, you probably think you should have reserved your bench for people that aren't blanking. So I think, theoretically, if you can get there, I like a triple up. I can't find a practical way to do it with the structure that I've got.
Yeah, exactly. I think double up is probably the way to go, probably what we're suggesting right now. They do have quite a lot of fixture congestion in general coming up anyway, so that's always a bit of a risk. And like Martial, as you said, he's been kind of a little bit in and out of the team, not been on great form. He's got only 3 goals over the course of the season. It's not that great, is it really? So perhaps one to avoid. I think Bruno would be the most interesting one out of anyone, but again, you're talking about selling De Bruyne to fit him in. And Eriksen, Eriksen's only got 1 goal. Not really too fussed about him.
You're relying on set pieces there, aren't you?
Yeah, I think there's some more interesting assets at some of the other teams, which we'll get onto in a minute. So I think, I guess that kind of broadly covers our thoughts on United. So we're going to quickly cover Liverpool, Chelsea, Spurs. And I think, as I said, these are just the 3 of the top 6 that perhaps haven't been performing so well this season, unlike Arsenal, United especially, kind of having great seasons. So Liverpool and Chelsea actually play each other this week. weird rumor about them possibly having playing each other twice in the same game week, which I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. But it's just so weird being on the podcast saying not waxing lyrical about Salah and Trent, because I basically did that for 4 years. Every single pod I did for the last 4 years, I was like, I love Salah, you must own him, he's a must own. I love Trent, he's a must own, you must own him. And now I'm like, no, don't buy these guys. I think they're just a hard void at the moment. They're in crap form. They're just really poor at the moment. Fixtures are middling, not particularly great. And I think they're potentially going to struggle for a little bit longer as well. So certainly not targeting any of their players. Gakpo's obviously an interesting one, having signed recently, and he was excellent in the World Cup as well. So he might be one to keep an eye on, but I don't think there's space for Salah, space for Trent, and any of the other players in my team right now.
I made the point last week that I don't think we should be overthinking the players that aren't performing from Liverpool and Chelsea. I think we should let an improvement in their output stimulate our interest rather than trying to anticipate it too much. I do still think, and that sounds bonkers, but just bear with me, I think a fit Darwin Núñez could still end up being good value. I know. And I know he's like got all the stats and none of the output. I get that. But I just think eventually that will start to turn good. And if it wasn't for his fitness concern this week and my ability to get game, I would have kept him, but I haven't. So actually I can't be that keen, can I? I think Chelsea are much the same. I think they've now got even more players to blend together. And I think Liverpool's problems are mainly in central midfield. I think if Liverpool were to bring in another central midfielder during the window and they get more attackers fit again, then their attackers might warrant a review. At the moment, I don't see that being the case. But I'm just, trying to indicate what would make me reassess. I think maybe if Potter was to receive the sack, I might reassess Chelsea. But I think any manager is going to struggle to work with that Chelsea squad just because it's just such a weird mess of different players that seem to have been recruited without any kind of obvious model or kind of intent other than, ooh, Arsenal want him, I'll buy him. So yeah, I think they're kind of long-term, not duds because that's going a bit far, but they're teams that I don't see radically improving in the next few weeks. So I probably wouldn't look at them with any serious intent. And they're also, most of them, just too expensive for what they provide.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I'd say same with Núñez. I'm not a fan. I mean, 8.9 million is just too expensive for what he's been offering compared to like some Mitrovic and Tony. You can get for a couple million cheaper and who actually score goals, as well as just looking like they might score goals. So not sold on Núñez for myself. And Chelsea, you obviously made some good points there about the amount of players they're buying right now. It's actually crazy. They've got 2 pages worth of Chelsea players on FPL. I don't think I've ever seen that before. I mean, they've had such a large playing squad. There's all these kind of players. I've watched their games. I'm like, who the hell are half these players? Like Hall and Hutchinson, and I'm like, it's just a bit mad at the moment with them as well. With so many injuries, bringing all these like young players in. And signing the world as well. Mudrik's not even announced on there, and as I said, they've got 2 pages worth of players. Wow, Yao Felix as well, and Badia Shield made his debut. I think he actually was probably the pick of the bunch in terms of their players. I think he's only 5.0 million. Picked up a clean sheet on his debut and the couple bonus as well. So he's actually quite an interesting pick if you're going to pick someone a bit random who fancy some. A random punt or a new punt. I'd say maybe Badia Shield of all the defenders. And yeah, it's weird, isn't it? They've got Aubameyang. What Aubameyang's doing there randomly. Might go back to Barcelona. Sterling's injured. It's just crazy at the moment at Chelsea. So yeah, let's avoid them. Or as you said, keep an eye on what they're doing with Mudryk as well, joining the mix. Just ridiculous contract that he's on, and we'll move on swiftly if you've got nothing else to say, I guess, about Chelsea.
No, move on.
Get on with it. We're gonna talk now about 4 teams, as I said, that have really kind of entered the fray this season, that have been the disruptors in the Premier League, and Newcastle obviously a big one, but also Brentford, Brighton and Fulham also all having great seasons. So JPFPR Brain asked us another question, is how can we take advantage of the excellent cheap Brighton assets when there was already no shortage of value on offer? And Amaya asked us about prioritising Brighton attack over Arsenal. FPL Goops also asked us about Tony, said he was considering him. It's up to you where you want to start. What do you think about these teams?
I think Brighton, in a sense, you shouldn't really compare them to Arsenal attackers because they're operating off mainly a vastly different price point. I think it's possible that you can have both, and I think they are all worth owning. I think Brighton, in terms of people like Mitoma, that there's definite potential to have them as your eighth attacker. Now, I know people have reservations about that because it leads to benched points, and I saw plenty of bench Solly Marches. But given that we're expecting kind of blank game weeks appearing up here and there, it might not be such a bad idea to have them in reserve rather than someone you depend on. And I think they're at a price point where you can stomach benching them and not feel like you're locking away a lot of value, particularly given how much value there is around. We're not at a position where all of the premium players are firing and we need to squeeze as much money out of our benches as we possibly can. So I think probably you can have that luxury as having them as an eighth attacker. I don't think I would be looking them as an alternative to like an Odegaard or a Saka, because I think they'll provide you with much more consistent returns because they're the best team in the league. But I think you can have a bit of both on that one. I don't know, how comfortable would you be, Nick, with the idea of having one of them on the bench, or do you think that's probably locking away points?
No, I think it's definitely an option. And I think, as I said, once the Champions League starts again, we're going to start seeing maybe a bit more rotation in the league. And I've got the likes of Cancelo in my team, who doesn't play all the time. So certainly having someone who comes off the bench is always useful. And Andres Pereira has been one of those kind of characters for me over the course of the season, just coming on, getting returns here and there. He's been sort of the perfect sort of fifth midfielder over the course of the season. And with the Brighton players, that they certainly offer that as well. So, there's kind of three guys there that have just really emerged. And obviously Trossard was their talisman for the first half of the season, talisman for last year. He's now kind of off the radar, pushing for a move probably to Chelsea.
I'm pushing for a move to Chelsea at this rate,
Well, yeah, you'll just be given an 8-year contract and signed for about 70 million plus add-on. So yeah, he's off probably. But I think the guys who've kind of emerged from his shadow have been excellent. So Solly March, it's like he's 5 million. He could easily be your fifth midfielder and come on and play the odd game here and there. But it's crazy that he's got 4 goals and 2 assists in his last 4 games. But he's actually only ever managed 4 goals in his last 5 Premier League seasons to date. So he's doubled his tally in just 4 games, which is pretty crazy. But you sort of, I'm not saying like that's going to be it. It's just a one-off, because you've seen what's happened with Almiron this season, for instance. Like the guy was getting slated, like that's a Grealish, wasn't he? For his goal tally, and he's doubled his output as well, 9 goals this season, which is just it's just crazy. So for all we know, March can continue to score week in, week out. Why not? If Almiron can do it, certainly March can. So I'd say perhaps get him in. I think Mitoma and Ferguson as well, Evan Ferguson, they've all returned in each of the last 3 games, and these weren't easy games. This was Arsenal, Everton, and Liverpool that they played. So it's not even like we're saying, oh yeah, they played Bournemouth and Forest. They played like, I'm not going to mention Southampton. They played Arsenal, Everton, and Liverpool. So they've got leaky Leicester up next with Ward in goal. So it could easily be some returns for them again. So by all means, I think Brighton, definitely worth targeting. And in terms of the budget thing, actually, I would say like, I'm feeling the budget stretch, so I'm not sure everyone has lots of money, because I've got Kane, Haaland, De Bruyne. I've got nothing in the bank. I've got Totti and Bueno. 2 3.9 million defenders right now. So
I had a lot of money for a long time. That was all I had going for me, really, was that I had no points, but I had money. I splurged it all on Kane this week, so I don't actually have any money. But I do know that people like Cancelo, for example, aren't offering great value, so they could easily be stripped back, and that would give me like another bunch of money again. Similarly, I'm not sure if I keep Mitrovic long term. Maybe he goes down to someone like upgrade elsewhere. I don't know. I feel like there is lots of ways, if you really want to release funds, Yeah, at the moment I am only speaking that in a purely theoretical sense, because I only have 0.1 in the bank. So
yeah, I do need to release some funds, to be honest, as well. And I think Cancelo is the man to sell to do that, because I said my 2 defenders are Totti and Bueno, my 4th and 5th, and Totti doesn't play. They're both 3.9, though I benched a Bueno clean sheet as well this week, which was a mistake. But definitely Brighton, I think we're saying buy their players at this moment in time. But obviously, you've got to figure out what your priorities are.
I would say that I don't think they're like a really nice thing to have in terms of the value that they represent, but I don't think they're like super must have. So they're probably quite good from a flexibility perspective, but I wouldn't prioritize them over other transfers, particularly around double game weeks and things.
They also have a potential blank in 25, always something to be wary of.
Yeah.
But Leicester, Bournemouth, Palace, Fulham's pretty decent next four, and they proved that they can beat the big guns this season as well. It's the same with Brentford's another one that proves that they can beat the big guns. Both beaten Manchester United, well, thrashed Manchester United really. Well, they both beaten Liverpool actually the last couple of game weeks, and Brentford beat City as well. Brighton's thrashed Chelsea. They've both been doing excellently. Brentford, I guess, who do you think you would be targeting there? What do you think about Ivan Toney as an option? Or is there too much risk with a potential gambling ban?
I've been really torn on Toney because obviously he's doing great. It's literally just the discussion of this potential suspension for his betting habits that's putting me off. There doesn't seem to be any kind of fixed timeline. I mean, I kind of did a bit of research in preparation for this pod because I knew this was one of the questions. And I can't find a definitive answer about when he might face a hearing or a sentencing or any of that kind of thing. So it's now like a really confusing quandary in a kind of way that you've never had to factor into FPL before. That, like, do you buy this guy and he eventually just the next week gets suspended? Would they give him warning on that? I don't know, because logically, if it wasn't for that, he would be an incredible buy. Like, their fixtures are very good and he's doing really well. He keeps picking up. By the way, the penalty he got was so dodgy. Like, he clamped someone's arm under his own arm and fell on the floor and got a penalty for it. Anyway, whatever. His penalty record is outstanding. So yeah, I find it really difficult to evaluate a fairly unknown risk. Like, it's there, but when does it strike? Where are you on that one?
It is a tricky one in terms of where you would fit. I think in terms of my forward line anyway, I've got Kane and Haaland and Mitrovic. I'm gonna probably just stick with Mitrovic for now. I'm not thinking about kind of swapping him out for Toney. It's an option though, because they're about the same price. But I probably will just stick with Mitrovic and hope that he can come good. As I said, for the other team we were going to discuss, there's not a lot to discuss. I wouldn't go near their defence. It's just about Mitrovic and his form. And unlike Toney, unfortunately, he's not been putting away his penalties. He's been trolling us with yellow cards. It's not been a great couple of weeks for him, in all honesty. But I think, the sideways move, I think, is you said if there wasn't this kind of impending gambling charge, I'd certainly be a lot more positive perhaps about a swapperoo there and moving Toney into our teams, because he has been excellent this season. And I think the other Brentford forwards have also been pretty impressive as well. Mbeumo, is another one, perhaps a 5.9, a sort of cheaper option, and Wissa actually in midfield as well. He actually scored a hat trick against Liverpool technically, but only one of them actually counted as a proper goal. So he's another one that you could be looking at Brentford. And also, I don't know what you think about the Brentford defence. I had Raya in my team for a long time, and I'm kind of gutted that I got rid of him on the sort of the World Cup wild card, because I think the defence have been really good as well, and I got kind of punished a little bit in terms of all the defensive, in terms of the clean sheet this week that lots of people picked up, and I didn't.
Yeah, I think they're fine defensively. I think they're a funny team. I think we'll probably talk about this when we talk about fixture difficulty and stuff. Brentford are one of those weird teams where they're significantly better at home than they are away. So I think if I was looking at a defender, I'd probably be looking at maybe a rotation, or maybe just a position where I can cover some of their more tricky away fixtures, because I think they've got a fairly clear lean towards home performance. They've got 19 points at home and only 10 points away. So I think there's a definite suggestion that they tend to do it better at home. I don't know actually if that applies to their clean sheets or not. I haven't actually looked that far. But I tend to prefer them at home. So if you're looking at cheap investment in them, I'd bear that in mind.
I'm just wondering about sort of the Cancelo downgrades to kind of save a little bit of money. And I was thinking, maybe the Brentford defence. The other team I was looking at, which was a good segue, I guess, is Newcastle and the double defence.
Yeah, that's where I was looking with Cancelo.
Yeah, because they've been just ridiculously good this season defensively as well, and they've also got a really nice run of fixtures. So they've got Crystal Palace, West Ham at home, Bournemouth away, Liverpool at home, which should be an easy win. And then the possible blank, unfortunately, in 25 against Brighton. So it stiffens a bit after that. But I think, looking at those defenders, the goalkeeper's been incredible. There's a few different options. I don't know which one would be. Obviously, everyone has Trippier anyway, but it's a sort of complement Trippier. You've got like Dan Burn channeling is in Erling Haaland's an amazing goal in the cup. In Fabian Schär, he hit a peach of a free kick that hit the woodwork, and Botman's begins his Newcastle career looking rock solid as well with 10 clean sheets to his name. So the bargain's sort of 4.5 million as well. So I think there's a few options there. I don't think the best one is, but I think club wise, I think perhaps Newcastle double defense would be the way to go again, and lots of people have had that all season.
I mean, my reticence there was the fact that they look likely to blank in 25. But I have been kind of mulling this over, and I think if I did go for someone like Botman, it would probably be Botman, then I would probably use the money that's released to upgrade Almiron. So it's in a sense that I'd just be keeping the double Newcastle rather than going to a triple Newcastle, which makes a blank a little easier to navigate. So yeah, Botman's the one that I've looked at closely as a Cancelo replacement. I nearly kind of got really angry with Cancelo this week and did it for a hit, but that would have been a bit silly. So I didn't do that, but he is kind of probably top of my list as a Cancelo replacement at the moment. Just as you said, just because Newcastle is so good defensively and so cheap as well. I think we have to enjoy them while they last, because they won't be that cheap next season.
Certainly Trippier, just ridiculous how many points he's been picking up over the course of the season. It's just every week it's just like, yeah, another 9 points of a Trippier. But unfortunately everyone owns him, so it means absolutely nothing for everyone. Just well on his way to a 200 plus point season, and 21 points more than any other defender, which is crazy. He's actually only 13 points behind Haaland as well, which is just
yeah, maybe we should perma captain Trippier. Maybe that's what we're all missing.
That's not a bad idea. If you're getting 9 points every week, why not? He hasn't blanked since game week 13, and that's only one of 3 blanks over the course of the season for Trippier. Incredible. Cool. So yeah, I guess that kind of moves us on quickly into the top sides and how we try to define what we consider to be an easy fixture. So, this week, for instance, I slipped up by benching Ramsdale against Spurs, and I benched Bueno as well, even though he had what would be considered perhaps an easy home fixture against West Ham. So should we be considering, a player with a home game against West Ham as being a no-brainer, or maybe a goalkeeper from the league's top side? And do you think the fear's gone from playing the likes of Liverpool and Chelsea? As I said earlier, Brighton have just kind of crashed both sides. Brentford's beaten both as well. These teams are starting to become a little bit more difficult. So what do you think about that in general? Like, should we perhaps turn things on their head a little bit and perhaps start backing the likes of Brighton players against Liverpool or Fulham players against Chelsea, or do you think this is all very much short-termism and the kind of it won't be long before kind of normal service resumes?
I think it's quite difficult because at the moment we've got a few teams radically overachieving and a few teams radically underperforming, and how you then readjust your approximations on fixtures is quite difficult. I would say that you should take FPL official fixture difficulty ratings with a pretty significant pinch of salt, given how out of sync it is now with actual achievement. I think in terms of Liverpool and Chelsea, I think there was probably a stage, particularly for Liverpool a couple of years ago, where you'd have run from the hills to have your players playing against Liverpool. That fear probably isn't there to the same extent. And if you've got an attacker against Liverpool, I definitely wouldn't be panicking, because they seem to concede pretty much most games now. So I think in terms of that point of view, there's much less risk than there used to be. And I think probably worrying about those fixtures for transfers is probably not worth it. But actually kind of quantifying it is quite difficult. I think I did touch on it a minute ago, but in terms of evaluating home and away differences, I think that's probably worth keeping in mind when you're kind of evaluating whether you want to own these players in particular fixtures. Some teams are significantly better at home than away, but some are fairly even. So Brentford was the one I touched upon earlier, 19 points at home, 10 points away. That's a home record, which is 6th best in the league. Conversely, Brighton have 14 points at home, but 16 away, making that the 4th best away record in the division. So there are some teams, I think, where you need to be slightly mindful of whether they are home away. Some it's not going to make much difference. But yeah, I do think we should be just a bit more critical of fixture difficulty ratings. I was never that critical of them and kind of thought, as a broad sweeping thing, I can just look at those green and red things on the FPL tracker and take those, just as a kind of good rule of thumb, even if they're not great at a granular level. Whereas I don't think they even work at that level now, because I think there's just far too much in flux. And I am as I said earlier, fairly convinced that Chelsea and Liverpool won't improve significantly in the next few weeks. So I don't think you need to keep recalculating them significantly. So that's kind of where I am on those ones. I find the bottom of the league much harder to rule on. So, in terms of whether you were asking about whether you should have benched Bueno against West Ham, there's simultaneously absolutely no quality and some quality down. I don't really know how to make sense of the bottom of the league. Like, some teams turn up and some don't, and you don't really know how to predict when they will and when they won't. Wolves do look better under Lopetegui. I think that's quite obvious. And West Ham probably are due to get rid of Moyes soonish. So maybe you should have seen that one coming. But it's very difficult to play those players when you've got kind of better, higher achieving prospects available. So I don't know if I'd have definitely started him. And as for Arsenal and your Ramsdale benching, we probably all need to treat Arsenal with a bit more trust. I think we haven't quite recalculated for the fact that they're winning the league at the moment by quite a comfortable margin and look fairly solid. So that's one of those ones where we perhaps haven't kind of recalibrated as well as we have with perhaps Liverpool, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with you there. I think actually just looking at my FPL team right now, I've still got Ramsdale on the bench and Ward, who plays Brighton at home, in goal. So yeah, that's a key example where you look at it and you think, oh, the Brighton home fixture is much better than the Manchester United at home fixture. But reality is, I should be playing Ramsdale. So that's a clear. Yeah, I've done it. I've just pressed save, and that's now updated. Bueno is certainly going to be staying on the bench with Totti, if that's how you say his name, because they've got Manchester City away. So
come on, Nick, did you just pick him because he's called Totti? You did, didn't you?
It was 3.9 million and he had played some minutes. That was kind of the extent of my decision making when I got the guy in. I think you made some really good points there in terms of just like the top sides, and perhaps the fear factor has gone a little bit. Liverpool and Chelsea, when you look at the fixture ticker, you definitely take that with a pinch of salt, especially if they're going to say the Liverpool way. Well, that's a 5, not necessarily this season,
No,
especially if you're looking at
it's not a 5, is it?
Yeah, Van Dijk's injured as well, and then even before we got injured, they were just very poor defensively. And Chelsea, they sign a new player week in, week out, but they have no idea who their best team is, and they're missing their best players with a lot of injuries as well. So certainly, I think that kind of thing has to impact your decision making, as opposed to kind of just looking at the fixtures on a very granular level. I think, and also Newcastle, they wildly exceeded expectations after being sort of 19th. Around sort of January this time last year. So they're another club where you might have originally thought, oh, Newcastle at home, that's a peach of a fixture. Not so much this season. They've been rock solid at the back, and your attackers aren't likely to score. They're more likely to score against Liverpool away than Newcastle at home. So it's always just something to kind of factor in and consider, I guess, when you're making your decisions and when you're looking at the sort of the next 5 fixtures and planning your transfers. I think especially this season. And yeah, Brighton, Brentford's very, very tough games as well. Cool. So hopefully that was a little bit of an interesting discussion, a little bit of an add-on to the pod after covering off the teams. So I guess that's more of a wrap, really, isn't it? So we'll quickly cover, I guess it's a bit early, isn't it, but transfers and captains in terms of what you're thinking. Are you going to do a transfer this week, Lucy? Are you sticking with Haaland?
Well, I think I am mulling over that Cancelo out to release funds, the kind of thing we have talked about. I guess it depends what minutes we see out of him in midweek as to where my position is on his minutes. I mean, there's no doubt that he's been a minutes risk so far. Could I kind of convince myself that it's Wolves, so it's worth going, kind of keeping him for that on the hope that he plays? I haven't really worked that one out yet. And as I said, I think the midweek minutes will decide that for me. Ideally, then I'd like to roll if I've got good news on that. If I've got bad news, I'm probably looking at Botman, as I said. I think there are a few good prospects, but I think at the moment Newcastle makes sense for doubling up. I am likely on Haaland captain again, for better or worse. But aside from double game weeks, I think this is probably the first week where there's been any sense of an actual decision about it. I think, previous weeks we've just been like, yeah, it's Haaland captain, don't even talk about it. But I am going to go with him. But I think this is the first week when I thought, oh, should I? But that's not yet enough for me to not do it, actually. But where are you with transfers and captain?
Yeah, I'm going to captain Haaland. There's not too many alternatives. I think maybe
No, that is an issue.
If you look at Kane against Fulham, perhaps would be an interesting pick, maybe. But then, as I said, Fulham have been a little bit stronger defensively this season. In terms of the transfers, it seems like the first time in ages that I actually even have the ability to roll my transfer. So I'm tempted to do that just because
just to enjoy it. Yeah,
I've just had too many fires, and I think the idea of having 2 free transfers would be quite useful for the following game week, maybe to kind of do a bit more of a lift and shift. But yeah, I guess if I was to do anything early, it might be to free up some funds with Cancelo to Botman. As I said, I don't have a lot of depth on my bench at the moment, and that would free up some decent funds. I think the other thing that we kind of mentioned briefly was maybe like a Mitrovic to Tony type of move as well. But again, that feels a little bit risky. So yeah, possibly rolling. We've still got a little bit of time to think about it and some more games to watch. So we shall see from here.
Yeah, excellent.
Super. So I hope you all enjoyed listening to the discussion. Didn't miss Tom too much. He'll be back, of course, for next game week. As I said, there's going to be more usual service and the timings will resume.
Excellent. Yes, thanks for listening, everyone. We were Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Twitter at WGTA_FPL. If you enjoyed listening to this, please like and subscribe to the podcast. For new listeners out there, if you think you'll be coming back, please hit that 5-star rating across platforms like iTunes and Spotify so more people can enjoy the pod.
Thanks, Lucy. Well, we hope we assisted you. Thanks all for listening. Bye.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?